So my name's Stuart. I've probably been working in the real world for a lot less time than most of you guys. In fact, I've only been in the industry for around 3 years since graduating with a Bachelor of Commerce. And I got to tell you, most of this stuff was not in the pamphlet. But I'm not really here today to complain about my work-life balance. What I am here to talk to you about is something that I've noticed as quite peculiar since I first entered the workforce. And what it is it's basically the way that we make cleaning rosters. But not just cleaning rosters. It's also the way we make grocery lists. But also the way that we record staff attendance and the way that we plan our project estimates. In fact, it's the way that we plan our media spend. And it's also the way that we do our quarterly estimates. And it's even the way that we calculate projected returns on multi-million-dollar investments. Seems to me that no matter what we're trying to plan out, we cannot escape the grips of Microsoft Excel. Every time there's even a sniff of a decision to be made, we look to the nearest computer and there it is, calling out to us. It's beckoning us, it sits there arrogantly beckoning us with its unassuming rows and its empty columns, awaiting all of our inputs to calculate whatever it is our minds can conjure up next. Because everything can be calculated, right? Well, it seems to me that Excel has a stranglehold on the way that we think, the way that we talk, and the way that we make decisions. Seems to be the go-to tool for everyone, from bankers to receptionists, from teachers to advertisers, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere soon. In fact, our obsession with calculations and with data and using spreadsheets has moved even beyond Excel. We're now entering the shiny, sexy world of big data, where it seems that every next breakthrough or innovation is just another algorithm away. It's a crazy world, right? Where we've embraced the idea that harvesting and analyzing an infinitely growing pool of data will lead us to the next big innovation. And if we haven't had that inspirational moment, we probably just don't have enough data. But human beings have a proud history of inventing and discovery, which far predates big data, which as a term only existed since 2009. Without big data and without Excel, we discovered gravity. We invented the wheel. We harnessed electricity. We mass-produced cars. We created the mobile phone. We discovered the art of flight. We put man on the moon. And we even invented this crazy thing called the internet. So it got me thinking, where did this obsession or this affliction of over-analysis and data and spreadsheets and calculation, where did it come from? And how, in such a short period of time, did it come to be all-consuming in our thinking? And just as a side note here, I feel like a bit of a dick because Victoria took us through 5 years, the whole story of how the vibrator came to be, and now I'm about to tell you a much boring one about how Excel came to be. So, back in the 70s, a spreadsheet was literally that. A sheet of paper spread out on a wooden desk in a musty accounting firm. It usually comprised 10 to 20 rows, hand-ruled, filled with all these little handwritten numbers. And accountants would use a physical calculator to make all these little calculations and end up with a nice, orderly row of totals down the right-hand side of the page. Businesses would hire these accounting firms to use these spreadsheets to make forecasts and projections and help their executive management teams allocate budgets and resources. So let's say you're an accountant working for a client that imported radios from China and sold them throughout Australia. You might want to find out how your production costs would change if you dialed up your next order by, let's say, 1,000, 5,000, or 10,000 extra radios, and how that would impact your bottom line. And if you wanted to get really fancy, you might even introduce a few different currency exchange rates and see how that would affect the scenario. All of a sudden, you've moved from a nice little spreadsheet on desk to an entire wall, maybe filled up with 20 pieces of paper, with hundreds of rows and hundreds of columns and thousands of different cells that need to be calculated. And you can imagine it was a mammoth task for 3 to 4 accountants paid by the hour to crunch the numbers and would use handwriting to fill out all of these different cells and then double, triple, quadruple check them so that the results on the right-hand side of the page that you were going to use to make your next business decision were all 100% correct. But still, seeing these massive scenarios played out in front of us opened up a world of hypothetical thinking. Businesses started asking, what if? What if the Chinese government introduced an export tariff? What if our shipping costs changed? What if we were able to limit the production costs? What if? What if? What if? And every one what if opened up another 5 what ifs that we might want to know the answer to. Unfortunately, every single what if required removing an entire row or an entire column and hours of calculations. And as accountants were paid by the hour, it simply wasn't feasible. So, fast forward to the late 70s. There's a man called Dan Bricklin, and he's sitting in a Harvard Business School accounting lecture. He's sitting at the back of the theatre, and he's watching his professor write up line after line, number after number, filling out a spreadsheet not too dissimilar from the one I just ran you through. And maybe after the second hour of calculations and recalculations, he thinks to himself, what if I didn't have to watch my professor doing basic calculations on my 50 grand degree? What if he could just edit that cell down in the bottom corner and then automatically, magically recalculate every related cell? Well, the timing was right. Dan had a background in programming. And here he is, who could tell? He just had an Apple II land in his hands, so he set to work writing the first ever computer-based spreadsheeting program. Now, once he was complete, he initially launched it with a Pong video game controller. You would have to turn the dial to move the cursor left or right, and once you found the cell that you wanted to edit, you would have to press the fire button. And when you were in that cell, you would have to turn the dial again, clockwise to turn the value up, and anti-clockwise to turn the value down. Once you were done, you would fire again to exit the cell. He even shipped with these beeping sounds so that you could get that auditory feedback. Every time you entered a cell, it would make a beep. And every time you turned the dial, it would make another beep. After a few months of sort of showing his customers his new product and getting them to use the Pong controller and the beeping, he received some overwhelming feedback that actually the Pong controller sucked for using a cursor. And the beeping added absolutely nothing. So he removed the annoying beeping and he introduced a more traditional controller called the keyboard, and therefore hammered the final nail in the coffin for accounting as a fun profession. We all know how this story ends. In 1985, Microsoft introduced the first version of Excel, and shortly after, the computer-based spreadsheeting program spread around accounting firms worldwide. Moving spreadsheeting from a manual, tedious, time-consuming, and expensive process to an automated, efficient, and cheap one meant that accountants were all of a sudden integral to business decision-making. They were invited to start talking about what would happen next week or the week after or the month after that, instead of just what happened last week. But it wasn't just accountants that benefited from this newfound power. Doctors were able to more accurately calculate anesthesia dosages. Teachers were able to record and analyze performance across schools and change their curriculum. Farmers were able to more accurately project when their next crop would be ready for harvest. And dads around the world rejoiced in their newfound ability to compare and budget for family holiday destinations. But perhaps more importantly, the spreadsheet was adopted by the finance industry and has since then gone on to power almost every decision made on Wall Street. What if we had a slightly better interest rate? What if we could limit our production costs? What if we had full control of the supply chain? What if these two companies merged? Excel let the finance industry map these scenarios out, and by tweaking a number here or a number there, they could instantly see how big an impact this acquisition or that investment was going to make. It's no wonder that the global finance industry was built on the love of the spreadsheet. These guys have mastered the art of telling whatever story needs to be told using a series of rows and columns that we call the humble spreadsheet. In fact, they've even introduced industry awards to acknowledge the amazing spreadsheeting abilities of some of their head economists and investment bankers around the world. There's one called Model Off, which is an annual award. And this guy right here, Diarmid the Diamond Early, is the World Model Off Champion 2014. They said he'd never be a supermodeler. So, with its pervasiveness across countries, industries, devices, you could be forgiven for thinking that Excel is one of mankind's single greatest achievements. But for what it's worth, I actually think it's the single worst tool we've ever created. It's a virus. It's completely overtaken our way of thinking, and it's broken us. You see, the biggest problem with Excel is it plays into humankind's innate and ridiculous desire to think that we can control everything. The human mind hates the concept of random. And we become really good at developing these concepts and backstories and rationale to explain things that don't make a lot of sense to us. I'm talking about constructs like superstition, karma, religion. And the spreadsheet is this perfect world where, for a brief moment between rows 1 to 999, rows A to Z, everything makes sense. We're in perfect control. We can tweak a number here or a number there. We can add a variable here and add a variable there and come out with the ending story that we want to tell. It simplifies every decision down to a tiny field of known inputs and outputs. This is the world of economics. The world where the price of a banana is determined by how many bananas are available and how many people want to buy one. Number of bananas available goes up, the price goes down. But the world of economics doesn't deal with a lot of things that we encounter in everyday life. Things like habits of eating a banana every day. Things like laziness of not being bothered to go to the supermarket. Things like peer group pressure, memories, emotions, or scrolling through your Instagram feed and seeing a picture that Kanye West uploaded of Kim Kardashian eating a banana. And all of these things shape and influence our purchase decisions. And herein lies the issue. Not a single problem we could try to solve will ever be that neat and tidy. I ask you, how many hat manufacturers had a sell on their next quarterly projections estimate? Sorry, how many hat manufacturers had a sell on their next quarterly projections that accounted for the chance that Pharrell Williams would wear a giant hat to the Grammys? The way that consumers make decisions is far less rational and orderly than spreadsheets would lead us to believe. Contrary to traditional economics, we're not robots. We're not programmed like robots. We get confused. We make suboptimal decisions. Sure, everything does happen for a reason, but sometimes the reason is people are just idiots. The world's filled with behaviours that not even Diarmid the Diamond Early's impressive spreadsheeting abilities could ever hope to map. The laws of economics and good spreadsheeting rely on all of us to be rational decision makers. We choose the best or the highest value creating option in every different decision we make. This assumes that we're aware of all of the pros and all of the cons, not just of the options in front of us, but of every single possible option in the decision. And we're expected to analyze these and weigh them up, and then we put all of the different options in a pile and choose whichever one comes out on top. And we're expected to do this for every single decision we make, whether it be comparing between 4 different types of petrol, 6 different types of bottled water, 25 different types of toothpaste at the supermarket, or 214,000 cars on carsales.com.au. The cumulative effect of this process is not only exhausting and overwhelming, but every single one of these decisions we make is riddled with issues in its own right. For example, should I have had a coffee before this speech? On the one hand, I really like the taste, and I like the buzz that it gives me. But on the other hand, I've been told coffee's not good for you. And when I have to deliver a speech, I get a little bit nervous, and I need to pee when I get nervous, and coffee's no good for that. So in the end, I decided not to have a coffee before the speech because my self-dignity overweighs the taste. But I'm pretty confident that the baristas up the back didn't have a cell in their spreadsheet for that. It seems all of these pesky, non-spreadsheetable things have a stronger grip on our decisions than we care to admit. So, why is it that we feel so bad when we lose a $20 note? You wait in line for a coffee maybe 5 minutes. You get to the front of the line and you're sure you've got a $20 note in your pocket. You put your hand in and you go to order the coffee and they say it's $4. You pull your hand out and it's naked. There's no $20 note there. And you look behind, there's no one there to help you. You've got no friends. You walk away empty-handed. And you think to yourself for the rest of the day, every time you pull your wallet out, you think, where's that $20 note? I can't believe I lost it. I'm an idiot. And then you don't buy that drink later on at that night because you lost the $20. You punish yourself for the rest of the day, and it really ruins your day. But curiously, we don't have the same reaction when it happens in the opposite direction. Imagine you're walking along the street and you find a $20 note on the ground. You'll pick it up. You might feel pretty chuffed. You might tell a friend. You might make a Facebook status update about it. But for the rest of the day, you're not going to reward yourself with every purchase you make. Every time you pull your wallet out, you're not going to think about the $20 that you just found. In fact, studies have shown that we would have to find at least 2.5 times what we've lost to come out emotionally neutral. So if I lost $20, I would have to find $50 on the ground just to have an average day and feel completely flat. You see, we're hardwired to disproportionately hate loss. And it kind of makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, right? A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, or 2.5 if the studies are anything to go by. Let's think about another example. I'm sure plenty of us would be happy to drive for an hour-round trip to a supermarket across the other side of the town if we found out that they have 50-cent avocados. But in actual fact, we'd probably just be better off working for another hour and earning enough money to buy twice as many avocados at full price from our local supermarket. But who wants to overpay for or lose money on avocados, right? We see this same kind of behavioural quirk play out in a grand scale on the stock market. We're always way, way quicker to sell and cash in on a stock when it's on the rise than we are to sell when it's on the slide and admit that we've made a loss. This behavioural quirk is called prospect theory, and this obsession with avoiding losses is everywhere. Part of the weight that we place on losses can be attributed to our own self-image. As soon as we own something, it becomes a bit of a part of us, and we feel reluctant to let go. Let's think about cars for a minute. We've all had the experience, or know someone who's had the experience, of selling a used car. But I want you to think about this. How many of us sold that car for the price that we initially listed it at? Not many, I'd be willing to bet. But it's a curiously common scenario. If we're all rational beings, we should be able... If we're all rational beings, we should be able to weigh up all of the pros and all of the cons of our used car. And no matter whether we're buying or selling that car, we should all arrive at pretty much the exact same figure. But it's not the case. Every single time we see, why do we consistently set higher prices for us to part ways with our own belongings? Well, it seems that not only are we asking buyers to part with their money for our scratched alloy wheels or our speckled paint job or our hardly used leather seats, we're also asking for them to cash out for the memories that we attach to that car. We're asking them to cough up for that feeling we had the first time we drove away from the dealership. We're asking them to cough up for the memory of the first road trip that we took, or that time when we picked up our daughter or our son or our nephew from school. Some people even take it further and they name their cars. They build up a persona, like the Maserati. And we ask for people to pay for that too. We're not just selling a car, we're selling a part of ourselves. And that's got to be worth more than $1,400 in a roadworthy, right? Unfortunately, it's pretty hard to capture all of these memories and these feelings and the Maserati in a carsales.com.au ad. And more often than not, we reluctantly devalue our car until it reaches a disgustingly low price that seems palatable to the market. In fact, this bond that we have with our cars doesn't take so long to create. In fact, we can create it in seconds. Think about this for a sec. Imagine I asked you all to stand up right now and walk to the back of the room. I asked you all to grab a coffee, have a chat, introduce yourself to someone new, go to the bathroom, chill out, whatever. And after about 5 or so minutes, I asked you to return and take a seat. Have a think about where you might be sitting. Now, the laws of economics and good spreadsheeting, they would tell us that we would look at every single chair and we'd weigh up all of the different pros and cons. We'd think, that one, closer to the exit, I can get out sooner. That one, closer to the coffee machine, it's kind of noisy and a bit annoying. That one, closer to the toilet, bad smell, not going to sit there. And at the end of that, we'd all choose the best seat available. But in reality, how many of us would be sitting exactly where we're sitting right now? I'd be willing to bet every single one of you. And trust me, it's not because you have the best seat in the house. In fact, we see this same thing play out in meetings. How often do you see, after a short break or a short activity or getting a glass of water, everyone will return to the exact same seat? Week in, week out, if you've got a meeting in the same room, you'll see familiar faces in familiar seats. This bond or this affinity that we share with our chairs, it's called the endowment effect. And it happens as soon as buttocks touch pleather. And we see brands take advantage of this as well. Take Ikea, for instance. Not only do they ask you to sit down in your chair and establish the endowment effect, but they also build a room around the chair that looks exactly like your house, so you feel like you're at home. Or Captain Snooze. They ask you to lie down on your bed, and a sleep expert will configure it to your body. It's your bed by the time you walk out of that store, whether you bought it or not. But how do we account for this overvaluation in our spreadsheets? Is it 1%? Is it 5%? Is it 50%? So far, I've told us we're all pessimistic and we're all vain. We're obsessed with avoiding losses, and we're obsessed with how material possessions contribute to our self-image. But I'm also here to tell you all that we're all stupid. We have absolutely no idea how much a product or a good or a service is meant to cost. In fact, and cost is a pretty important ingredient in determining value, right? In fact, we have so little idea on how to price or cost something that we'll latch on to almost any number, no matter how unrelated, in order to give us an idea of how much it's worth. We see restaurants take advantage of this. There's a reason that menus look like this. $16 for fish and chips. It's kind of expensive, right? Even by broadsheet hipster standards. But when you've seen the surf and turf for $38 and the salmon for $28, $16 all of a sudden seems kind of reasonable. In fact, it seems kind of cheap. Suspiciously cheap. I think I might get the salmon. There's a reason that barbecues galore stock a $5,000 barbecue. It's not because they want to sell it. It's because it makes us feel a lot better about buying the $3,000 barbecue. At least we didn't get fully ripped off. But not only are we influenced by pricing at the moment, we're also influenced by purchases that we've made before. Take, for instance, imagine taking a Mexican visitor coming to Melbourne, taking them to Mamacita and asking them to pay $14 for tacos. But it doesn't stop thousands and thousands of Melburnians queuing up there every week of the year. And it's not just dollar for dollar comparisons that we use when we're looking for price indicators. Like newborn ducklings will latch on to almost any figure, like newborn ducklings latching onto the first sentient beings that they lay their eyes on, will latch on to almost any figure when we're trying to establish value of a product. A famous MIT study asked test participants to write down their social security numbers, the last 2 digits in particular. And then they invited them to an auction to bid on a number of different goods and services. And then they recorded all the results. What they found was that those that had larger 2 digits, such as 90 or 89, bid on average 66% higher than those who had low digits, like 10 or 20. Even though their social security number had absolutely nothing to do with all of the products that they were bidding on. This phenomenon is called imprinting. And just like prospect theory and the endowment effect, it's one of many undeniable, consistent behavioural quirks that we all display on an everyday basis. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg. The emerging field of behavioural economics has uncovered dozens of these. And until our glorious spreadsheets and our Excel spreadsheets and Diarmid the Diamond's amazing modelling can handle all of these, I suggest we should stop kidding ourselves that Excel can solve all of our problems. Thanks.